When it comes to learning how to manage your table's data, and what I'm talking about here is how to modify, update, and delete your records, and, well, either the records or the data they're in, I've got some tips, tricks, and shortcuts I want to show you. So to get started, I'm going to come over here and open up my employees table. Let's see, how many records do I have? A total of 47, and you can see all the fields. In fact, I have more that I want to keep track of on each employee, like their hire date, title, and so on. In any case, when I want to create a new record, and I know we already learned how to create new records in an earlier training video, but here I got some additional things I want to show you now that we've advanced along in our training here. When it comes to creating a new record, there's two ways I can do it. I can either go ahead and scroll down to the bottom till I find a blank row, and of course scroll over to the left hand side so I can enter in my data from left to right. Or you can imagine if I had thousands of records that I don't want to scroll down past that many records to get to the bottom. So what I can do, let me go ahead and scroll up, and to get to the bottom and to create a new record, I can come down here on the record navigation bar and, well, there it is, new blank record. Go ahead and click on it, takes me right down to the bottom, and I can go ahead and start entering in my record. Let me go ahead and scroll down just a bit so I can center that more on my screen. So to get started, I'm assuming with the employee ID it's going to be consecutive here, 46, 47, 48. That you'll see when I start typing in data, it pulls up this pencil here with the dot dot dot. That means that when I start typing, that this line item or this record is in edit mode, it's in write mode. And when I'm ready, when I save it, it'll remove that pencil, meaning that the record's been accepted. In other words, Access has to accept the record before it can be saved. For example, if I go ahead and I delete this and I want to type in some text, in other words, no numbers, I know this is a number field, but when I try to save it, it doesn't accept it. It has to accept it before it can save it. And why does it not accept it? Is because this field has the number data type. In other words, it can only accept numbers, not text. So let me go ahead and come back in here, delete the text, and then type in my number, and then hit the tab key or the right arrow key, or I can use my mouse to advance to the next field, but tabbing works better for me because I don't want to take my hands off the keyboard to use the mouse. If I can keep them on the keyboard, I can fly through this a lot faster. So back. Let me go ahead and scroll over just a bit. Now, I don't have to scroll over and take my hands again off the keyboard. In fact, if I scroll back and I keep hitting the tab key, it'll automatically scroll for me. In any case, I can keep my hands on the keyboard. Let me scroll down just a bit. When I get to this field, the home number field, watch what happens when I click inside the field. So what we're looking at here is known as the mask. It's got these prompts here that shows us what the database is requiring when it comes to entering in the data. The area code and then the 7-digit number. Notice when I click off of it, it disappears. Notice that when I tab to it, it doesn't pull up. It doesn't pull up unless I start typing in the numbers. When I type it in and I'm like, oops, looks like I'm typing in the area code, I better make sure it's the area code and go ahead and follow the prompts there. And you'll notice that when I'm done, it exactly fits the amount of data that's required because those symbols disappear. In any case, hit the tab key, go to the next field. Now when I get to a field and I notice that the field above has the exact same type of data that I'll be entering in below it, instead of typing it in, the shortcut key to copy that and paste it is Control apostrophe. Boom. Automatically pulls the data up above, a copy of it down below. There's a shortcut. Hit the tab key. Let me go ahead and scroll over. Now when it comes to entering in a date, there's many ways that you can enter it in. You can manually type it in using the slashes. When I type in 07, is it 1907, 2007? Hit the tab key. Is 2007. If I need to edit that or change that, just go ahead and go back in it, click in it. And with the cursor, whatever you delete, when you hit the delete key, it deletes what's in front of the cursor. When you hit the backspace key, it deletes what's behind the cursor. And then go ahead and type in 19 and then hit the tab key. Or you can click on the icon next to it, which brings up the calendar, and go ahead and select a date. Or, let me go ahead and delete it. If it's today's date, go ahead and hold down the Control key and hit the semicolon key on the keyboard, and there you go. Hit the tab key. Let me go ahead and type in. Now I'm at the end here. Let me go ahead and type in $50 an hour. There are many ways that you can save this record. One way is to simply close out of the table. Now when I close out, it's not going to prompt me because I haven't saved it yet. Do you want to save this like all the other Microsoft applications, like Microsoft Word? It's strange, but when I close out, it saved it. How do I know? Well, let me open it back up. Remember, we originally had 47 records. Well, there's 48. In fact, how do I get to the bottom of the database? Well, you can click on New Blank Record, but I don't want to create a blank record. I just want to get to the bottom. I can scroll, or Back on the record navigation pane, there it is. Click on the last record button, takes me right to the last record. There we go. So that's one way to save it. When I come back in here and I delete or add some text, you'll notice that the pencil comes back up. It's in write mode. And there are other ways I can save this. I can either click off in another record. You can see that it accepted it and saved it because the pencil's now gone. Or let me click back, and another way to save it, you can click on the Save button. You can also, if you want to stay in this line item, this record here, without clicking off of it or using the mouse to click on the Save button, hold down the Shift key and hit Enter. It keeps me there without me having to lift my fingers off the keyboard in case if I need to tab over and make additional edits in that record there. Okay, next let me go ahead and scroll over to the title column. Let's say that I want to quickly find out how many customer service reps I have in my database, or employees who have the title customer service rep. Well, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and click over anywhere in this field here, the title field, and then bring up the Find window, which I can do by coming up here on the Home tab to the Find group and clicking on the binoculars. It brings up the Find window. Click Cancel, or use the shortcut key, Control F, which brings up again the Find window. You can see it's already got what I have been previously searching for, the sales representative. Let me go ahead and delete that. And we want it to find again customer service rep. So let's type it in. Now before I go ahead and click Find Next, what am I looking in? I'm looking in the current field, not the entire document. What's the current field? It's the title field. What am I looking for? Do I want it to match the entire field or just any part of the field? Well, I want it to match the entire field. It has to say customer service rep, not reps. Otherwise, I would say any part of it. And I'm searching all of the field, not just going down and searching down from where I'm at or searching up, but all of it. So let's go ahead and click on Find Next. There's customer service rep, so I can number that 1, 2, and then it takes me back up to the top when it's finished looking down at the bottom where I started. And then there's 3, click Find Next, 4, 5, 6, I'm on record 22, there's 23. Keep clicking through. Then once it's done counting, then it stops and it says, okay, we're done searching. Let me go ahead and click OK. Now if I quickly want to update all the customer service reps to just customer service and don't have the rep, what I can do is I can come here and I've got what I'm looking for, click on the Replace tab, so it still has here, what do I want to find, customer service rep, but I want to replace it with just customer service. So to instantly replace all of the customer service reps with the title customer service, go ahead and click on Replace. And you'll notice because I'm still in the open window where I began finding, that it's telling me, look, I've already searched all the records and there was no items that were found. Well, it did. It started to change this. So it kind of has a funny little thing that when you're finding something and it's already found everything, that in the same breath where you try to replace everything, it says, look, I've already done the search. So what we can do is we can go ahead, instead of replacing one at a time, finding next, because it's already found everything, click Cancel, and you can see it's trying to change this one. Click off in a blank area, and then go ahead and click on Find Again, or because we want to replace, click on Replace. It brings up, it didn't forget, at least in this session, what we're looking for and what we want to find. So we can go ahead and click Find Next and Replace, Find Next and Replace, or just Replace All. You won't be able to undo all this replacements. Are you sure you want to do it? Yes. So let's go ahead and let's go back to Find. Let's see if we can find any customer service reps. When I click Find Next, it says, look, I'm done searching. So we can cancel, click Find Again, and then say Find Next. It can't find any of the records because, well, there's no customer service reps. But if we delete REP and just have customer service, click Find Next, there we go. We can find them. Let me go ahead and click Cancel. If I ever need to get back to the beginning, the first record, you can hold down the Control key and hit Home. Control Home takes me to the first record, or again down here, the navigation bar, you can click on first record. Control End is another way. When you hit Control END, End, the End key, takes it down to the end of the database here. Well, takes you to the last row, the last field. Shortcut key for Control Home is also F5. You can hit the F5 key, takes you back to the beginning, upper left hand corner. The final thing I want to show you is how to add a total row. So if I want to go ahead and get the totals for, let me scroll over, the number of hours being put in this week, because when I scroll to the bottom I don't have a total. But if I come up here on the Home tab to the Records group and click on Totals, it adds the total row. How do I know it's a total row? Well, One indicator is that you got the blank row where you enter in a record and an additional row. And you can see when I hover over it, there it is, click to add total. So let me go ahead in this field, click, gives me a drop down arrow, and say I want to sum up that entire column. And as you saw, not only just the sum, but you can get the average, the count of how many cells, the maximum hours that was put in that week. So it looks like somebody went overtime by 2 hours. That's not good. And also you can do additional ones, not just for that field, but also add up the totals for all the other fields. And then of course when you're done, just go ahead and click on it to deselect it, and it's gone. If you want to be able to sort your records here for whatever reason, for example, let's say I want to sort my records by the customer's name, so I have it ascendingly, all those customers that begin with the letter A, B, C, all the way down to, well, at the bottom, those that begin with the letter Z. That's ascending, A to Z. And to do it, I can do it one of many ways. I can either come up here on the Home tab to the Sort and Filter group and click on Ascending, and there you go, A to Z, and then there's Descending, just the opposite, up at the top, Z down to A, or Condescending. No, I'm kidding. In any case, before I do it, make sure that you've got one of the fields that you have selected in that column, then go ahead and click on it. The other ways you can do it is by clicking on the column labels drop down arrow and also do A to Z or Z to A. It doesn't say ascending, but you can see the icon A to Z, A to Z. Okay. Let me click out, and another way is just to right click anywhere within the column, and there it is, A to Z. Click on it, does a couple of things. First of all, it sorts it ascending. You can see it's highlighted ascending. It's applied to this column. Another way to look at it is that you can look at the column header here, and you can see that the arrow's pointing up. That's the symbol that signifies that this column's being sorted, and because it's going up, it's ascending. If it was going down, it would be descending. So descending is going from first those names that begin with the letter Z. I don't have it, so it starts with, well, this customer's name that begins with the letter W, all the way up to B for Big News Network. And then if I want to remove that sort and go back to where I started, well, it's up here on the Home tab, Sort and Filter, click on Remove Sort, and there we go. And then finally, they have what's called consecutive sorts. In other words, if I want to be able to sort two or more columns at the same time, so for example, I want to sort it by state, and then after it's sorted by state or grouped by state, like when I group them all together, they're sorted, then I can look over here and have them sorted by customer name. So to do this, when you're doing two or more sorts, a consecutive sort the column first that's of least importance in your consecutive sort. So between these two columns, the one of least importance is my customer name. I'll sort that first. Click on the drop down arrow, and let's do descending, Z to A, and then I'll go ahead and sort this column. The last one I'm going to sort, the one of most importance, that will take precedence. So let me show you. Click, and let's do A to Z. So it sorts it here, and then it updates all the other sorts to match this sort because it was the last sort that I did. But if there's any groupings within this original sort, like you can see a run here of Utahs, then I'll go ahead, after it's done with this column, go over here and revert to that sort. So let's see if it makes sense. We've got a run here of Utahs. We've got Utahs here. Now this one's being sorted descendingly, so after it sorts ascending and it's got a group here, then we'll go ahead and do it descending. So let's see if it does it. R to the L's to the H to the F. Yeah, it's descending from the low end of the alphabet, R's, all the way up to the F, fall cleaning. And then to go ahead and clear all sorts, of course, come up here in the Sort and Filter group and click on Remove Sort. You can see I'm in the Employees table. Down at the bottom I have a total of 48 records. I don't want to view all of them. I just want to view those employees who are based in the state of, let's say, Utah. So the criteria is going to be UT for Utah, and to filter in only those employees who have that criteria, I can do it one of a few ways. I can either come up here and click on the column header for that, this field that I want to be able to filter. Click on the drop down arrow, and you can see a list of values that are currently being displayed. They're checked. I can uncheck those values and leave the last one checked for Utah. Click OK, and it'll just filter and pull in only those employees with the value of UT. Or you can imagine if you had hundreds of values here, you don't want to uncheck all of them and then recheck one or two. Instead, let me go ahead and check select all. Uncheck that. It unchecks all of the values. Then you can go ahead and check the one or two values that you would like and then click OK. It does a couple of things. First of all, it filters for just that value there, UT for Utah. Second of all, if I didn't know any better and I opened up the table, I mean, you can imagine looking down below here, that I would just think that there's 24 records. But if I have an eye for this, when you look up in the column headers here, if you see a little funnel, that means that the records are being filtered, and the filtered has been applied to this field. So look for the funnel. In fact, you can come up here on the Home tab to the Sort and Filter group. You can see the funnel there, and there's the name of it, Filter. You can see also a bunch of other funnels here, which we'll cover. In fact, you have the toggle filter. Once you've applied the filter, you can toggle off of it and go back to your 48 records, toggle it again, and go back to reapplying the value or the criteria for filtering for UT, the state of Utah. When you close out, be sure to save your work. That way, if you want to be able to go back to your employees table and click and use the toggle filter, because you saved it, it'll go ahead and apply it. Now, the toggle filter is not only on the top, on the Home tab in the Sort and Filter group, but it's also down below on the record navigation bar. That way, if you're not on the Home tab, you don't have to go up and make a few clicks. Just come down here and click on it. Go to Unfiltered. Click on it to go to Filtered, and there we go. To go ahead and clear this filter, you can do it one of a few ways. You can either come up here, click on the drop-down arrow, and clear it, or check to select all the values so all of them will be seen. Or let me click Cancel. You can click in one of the cells down below in the State field and right-click, and there it is. You can also clear it from there. And then we're back to where we started, 48 records. You can also filter 2 or more fields at the same time. And let's go ahead and filter it a different way. For example, if I go ahead and click in the any one of the cells for the State field, you can come up here and there's the Filter button. Click on it. Brings up the same list. So for me, really, since I'm let me click Cancel. Right here, I might as well just click on the drop-down arrow instead of making all that way up there. You can also do what's called Filter by Selection. For example, instead of clicking on the drop-down arrow and unchecking all except for Utah, let me click Cancel. If it's just one value that you want to filter by, go ahead and click in the cell that contains that value and either right-click and go down to equals Utah, or let me click in that cell again. You can come up here, go to the Home tab, Sort and Filter, and click on Selection, drop-down arrow, equals Utah. That's known as Filter by Selection. I prefer right-clicking and staying down here and not coming all the way up here to the ribbon. Sometimes you may have to, but if I can show you shortcuts down here, I will. So let's say go ahead and equals Utah. There we go. Filtered by selection. Now I can go ahead and filter another field as well. Let's say that I want to be able to filter the last name because I was talking to one of the employees and I remember his last name began with a D, and I think I remember his first name. So let me just go ahead and filter last name, those that begin with the letter D. To do that, I can go ahead and right-click on any one of these that begins with the letter D, like Donaldson, Doe, and then come down here. You get some other additional options like, again, filter by selection, or does not equal Donaldson, or contains Donaldson, or doesn't contain. You also have a little arrow that gives you more options here for text filters. Could begin with, and then type in the letter D, click OK, and hey, there we go. So then I can look through here and go, let's see, I remember, oh, that's right, it was Duck, and his first name was Donald. Okay, that was easy to remember, but I didn't remember it, so I was able to go ahead and apply this filter here that began with the letter D. Now to go ahead and unapply these filters, you can click on the drop-down arrow, or probably easier is to right-click in each one and clear it, and then come over here and right-click in that one and clear it. But you can imagine if you had dozens or hundreds of fields and you applied many filters here, like a dozen, I mean, that's annoying. That could take too long to right-click in every field. So instead, I'll come up here on the Home tab to the Sort and Filter group, click on the Advanced drop-down arrow and say I want to clear all of them. Click on it. We're back to where we were, 48 records. One last thing I want to show you is that if you do want to go ahead and apply a filter to the table, but you don't want that filter applied every time you open it up, and you don't want to toggle it, you can actually apply your filters here and save it as a query. It's one of the many benefits of a query. So let me go ahead and apply some filters here. Let's right-click on Arizona and say it equals Arizona, and then also apply another filter. Let's just right-click here and go to Text Filters, give us some more options, and say it does not begin with anybody who begins with the letter H. Click OK. So what I can do is I can come up here, click on the File tab, go down to Save Object As, and change it from a table and say we want to save our results as a query. Now I want to come up here and delete Copy Of, and delete the 3-letter prefix TBL because it's no longer a table. It's QRY, Query Employees. You could get a little bit more specific, Filtered, and then click OK. And then come back up here, click on the File tab, pops us back to our from the backstage to the front view here. of our database, all our tables, and also we've got our new query. So that way I can go ahead and close out of here. That was the query that we were looking at. Close out of here, not save it, so I can open up my employees. Got 48 records. I don't have to deal with the toggle. I don't have to deal with filters. But if later on I need those filters without having to reapply them all, I saved it as a query. Go ahead and double click and there it is. Now before we talk about what a subdatasheet is, we need to understand what datasheets are. And then we'll talk about the subdatasheet of datasheets. And as you recall in an earlier training video, datasheets is the place in tables, also in queries, that you can view and enter in your data. Think of the keyword data in datasheet to view data and enter in data, okay? In any case, the two views that we were toggling back and forth when we were creating and designing our tables and then entering in our data was the design view and the datasheet view. You can see up here I've got my customers table open in datasheet view. How do I know? Well, when you come up here on the Home tab to the Views group, you can see the design element, meaning that if you want to go to the design view, because right now you're in the datasheet view, I mean, you can click on the drop-down arrow and see that the datasheet is highlighted there. That's fine. We haven't talked about the other two views, but we will later on, the pivot chart and pivot tables. But right now we were just focusing on datasheet design. So click on the design button, takes me to the design view where I can edit the fields that I've already added, add additional fields, update the data type, and so on. And then when I want to go ahead and start entering in data into those fields, then of course come back up to the same place, and instead of being a design icon, now it's the datasheet view icon. Click on that, go ahead and view your data, enter in your data. So having said that, now that we know what a datasheet is, subdatasheets, the definition is subdatasheets are datasheets nested within datasheets, like nesting a table within a table, but that they're related. In other words, we create relationships between those two tables, and it will give us that ability to view the subdatasheets. In other words, I'm looking at the datasheet here, and if I want to see what table it's linked to without opening up the other table, then come up here, and I don't know if you noticed this, but when we started creating relationships between our two tables, and some of the tables we opened up, you notice that this additional field over to the left has been added with little plus signs. You expand that, it opens up the subdatasheet or the table that the customer table is linked to. Now, are these actually supposed to be linked? As you recall, when it came to creating relationships or viewing relationships, those tables that are linked, you can come up here, click on the Database Tools tab, go to the Relationships group, click on Relationships, and there we go, Customers to Orders. But the Customers table is also linked up to the Billing Information table. It's a one-to-one relationship, and this is one-to-many, by the way. In other words, the Customers table, I can have one company name, and over here have one contact person at that company. That's why it's one-to-one, and that's why I linked the primary key to primary key and not created a foreign key, because I don't want to have many contacts. And then we can have one customer have hopefully many orders, so that's why we have the infinity symbol, the foreign key. Hopefully we have a lot of duplicate customer IDs. That means that they made a lot of orders, okay? So one-to-many. In any case, back to our customers table, you can see that the subdatasheet, there's only one. Well, see if this gives it away. How do I know which subdatasheet is it? Well, order ID, order date, must be the orders table, okay? Because I don't have these fields in the billing info table that the customer table is also linked to. So see if this makes sense. I have the record here for Happy Town Play World, the customer's name, and when I go ahead and expand the plus sign, it's linked to that table, so it shows me the subdatasheet, and in this case all the orders that that customer has made. And what's cool about this is that if that customer calls now, I can go ahead and create an additional order. If I want to go ahead and expand them all at once, then I have to be in one of the main records or the datasheet, not in the subdatasheet. So when I click up here and I go to the Home, to the Records group, and click on More, down to Subdatasheet, it gives me these options, okay, to expand, collapse, and remove. But if I'm in the subdatasheet and I go to More, to Subdatasheet, I can't expand or collapse, because what am I collapsing within the subdatasheet? Nothing. But in the main datasheet, then of course More to Subdata, I would be collapsing or expanding or removing the subdatasheets. So I can go ahead and expand all, and of course I can go ahead and subdatasheet to collapse all. So the subdatasheets are very unobtrusive. I mean, you just get this little plus sign. If that annoys you, then of course you can always remove the subdatasheet. So by default, anytime you start creating relationships with your tables, Access is going to figure out the relationships and start linking up or creating subdatasheets that you can, well, this little column here that you can expand and find the related data or table that's tied to this table here. Again, we've got the customers table over in the relationships here that you can see. linked up to two different tables. So why didn't it go from customers and just open up the subdata sheet to billing info? Why did it go to orders? Well, by default, it wants to go, or it leans towards the one-to-many relationship, where you can have one to many as the default. Now, you don't have to have that. You can go ahead and remove it, but it can only have one subdata sheet at a time, meaning that when I expand this, it's linked one way to just one table and not having two tables side by side. But it could have a subdata sheet within a subdata sheet within a subdata sheet if you want to go that route. If I want to go ahead and remove a subdata sheet, well, let me go ahead and collapse it first. Then come up here to the Home tab, to the Records group, click on the More button again, and then go ahead and remove it. I no longer have that field. Now I can go back and say, okay, I didn't want it the way that Access defaulted it, the customers table to the orders table. I want to be able to view the relationship or the subdata sheet to the billing info table. So now that I'm in the customers table, then I can come up here, click on the More button again, go to Subdata Sheet, and click on Subdata Sheet. It gives me a list of all the tables, and it says, okay, what fields that have the matching data type and the same type of data do you want to link up to, the master to the child? Now the master is going to be what I'm in currently, which is the customers table, and the child fields will be that primary key or foreign key with the matching data type and type of data in another table. Now you can see why I strongly recommend, like I said in an earlier training video, that when you create foreign keys or you're linking up one table to another table, the primary keys, where you want to go ahead and create the same name, because you can see customer ID to customer ID. I mean, I could name this something else that it's linking to and call it CID, and as long as it has the same data type and type of data, then we're fine. But I mean, it just makes so much more sense for me. So I have the table with the master field customer ID, the primary key. By default, it wants to link up, well, to what table? Click on the drop down arrow, and these fields, order ID and order date, it's got this magnetism that it wants to link up if it has more than one relationship with different tables to the one-to-many. So it's pointing right towards the order table. I mean, the operative word here, or fields, are order, order ID, order date. So to change that, all I have to do, leave the master alone, is to come up here and select the table that I want to link to, the child field, and notice that when I click on that and I click on this drop down arrow again, I don't have the order ID or the order date. Well, I have the first order, but in any case, so it changes that and it only shows the fields in the billing info, and it's got the customer ID. So I'm linking customer ID from the customers table, which has all the customer information, to the customer ID, as you can see by only clicking on the drop down arrow, the fields within that table, the customer ID there. So I can go ahead and click OK, and there we go, the plus signs. So I expand it, and it gives me the subdata sheet. So we have the customer name, then we have the contact person over there. Now what's interesting is I got another plus sign here, that when I click on that, it goes back to the customer name, because you're looking at a one-to-one relationship, because for every contact person that I have at that company, well, that contact person is assigned to that company, and that company is assigned to that contact person is assigned to that company, blah, blah, blah. It goes on forever, so that's very annoying. So in a way, I guess you could see why when you go ahead and create relationships that Access automatically wants to go towards the one-to-many. If that table is linked to two different tables, then the one-to-one. Because man, this just goes on forever. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll click on More, go back to Subdata Sheet and remove that. And notice that because I wasn't in the main data sheet, but one of the subs, it just removed it from that. Oh boy, that's annoying. So what I want to do is come back up here, and this is a good lesson. Go into your main datasheet view, and then go ahead and click on More, Subdatasheet, and remove. And then we can go back real quick to Subdatasheet here. And the master is going to be the table I'm currently in that I want to link up to the other table, which again by default, Access is attracted towards the one-to-many relationship. So we're looking at, by default, the fields in the order table, the customer ID. Click OK. We're back to where we started. Now before I show you what a query wizard is, first of all, what's a query and why would I want to use it? Well, a query, to oversimplify, is a way to extract information from your tables here, all that needs to be seen, not that could be seen. Because, for example, if I open up my computers table, do I need to always see every single field here? Not in my case. There may be a time where I just want to pull up the asset tag, the date received, and the purchase price, and I don't need to see the other fields. You can imagine if I had dozens of fields here, dozens of columns, and tens of thousands of records, that every time I pull up the computers, my system's going to slow down a bit while it tries to pull it all in. Or at the very least, it'll slow me down, because if I just want to see those three fields, do I go ahead and redesign this table and move the purchase price next to the asset tag, especially if the purchase price was on column like 30, instead of scrolling over and then scrolling back? Well, that could work that instance, but I don't think you want to keep changing it, going, okay, now I need to see this field over next to this field and keep redesigning it. I mean, that's a waste. So go ahead and create a query and just pull in those fields that you want to see. Now that's just to get started. I mean, a query can do so much more, as we'll cover in the next couple of training videos. For instance, if that's not a selling point for you to why you may want to use the query, let's say that I want to go ahead and be able to see, again, these three fields, but also the manufacturer's name. Well, to see that, you would say, I'd have to open up the manufacturer's table. No, you can actually create a query and be able to pull up the manufacturer's name. Now, of course, these tables have to be related either directly or indirectly. How do I know that they're related? The simplest way to find out is to come up here on the Database Tools tab and clicking on the Relationships button here. And you can see that the tables are related with that line there. In this case, we've got a one-to-many relationship. So whenever I enter in computers, I have to pull the manufacturer ID or look it up and see if it's available in the manufacturer's table. If not, this is where we create it. Okay? So always in a one-to-many relationship, you have to create it in the one table so it's available and can be duplicated if, in this case, we purchased more than one computer from the same manufacturer. So there's the direct relationship. It's related, so I can go ahead and pull up the fields here and pull, in this case, the manufacturer's name over here, and not have to pull in the manufacturer's ID because I don't need to see that field. Indirectly, I could also pull up fields from the computers and the departments because, metaphorically speaking, the only way that I know Bob is through Susie here, or I know departments is through the employees. So what's a good example? Well, let's say that it's that time of year where I've got some funds that I can replace a bunch of computers. I would like to go ahead and find the department, there's the department name, that has the oldest computers, the date received. So I can pull in those two fields, find out the oldest date received, which department that's tied to, and give them the new computers. Now that we know that these two tables are related, computers and manufacturers, let's go ahead and close out of the relationships. And I'm just going to pull up the manufacturer's name and the asset tag, date received, and purchase price. I'll right-click on one of the tabs and close all. And so to create a query, the operative word being create, come up here and click on the, there it is, create tab, and go to the queries group and click on the query wizard. Microsoft has what are called wizards in most of their programs. And a wizard gives you a little pop-up window with a bunch of steps that you go through where it asks you a bunch of questions, you give it the answer, and then through all that, the wizard will create something that hopefully you'll find of use. In this case, we want a simple query. Let's go ahead and click OK. Here's the first step in the wizard. It says, okay, which table or queries, because we can also pull in data or fields from queries, but when you click on the drop-down arrow, you can see all that I have are tables. No queries yet, but we're going to create one. So remember, I want to pull the fields in from my computers table. So it lists down below all the fields available in the computers table, and then I need to select which fields that I'd like to see in my query. Well, I want to see the asset tag. You can select it, hit the arrow to add it over as one of the selections, or you can double-click to add it. To remove it, you can double-click. To add all of them, click the double arrows, of course, to remove them. Asset tag, date received, and double-click on purchase price. Okay, and then I also want to add from a related table, the manufacturer's table related to computers, the manufacturer's name. Now you could look at this and go, hey, wait a second, you're not adding the manufacturer ID. Again, this is only the fields that you want to view. Behind the scenes, Access still knows that they're linked up, so because you don't add the manufacturer ID, the foreign key in this table, or the primary key in the next table down here, which is going to be manufacturers, just want the name, not the primary key. If you don't add that, it's not going to fall apart. It'll keep the link behind the scenes. This is just what we want to view, okay? So we have fields from two different tables, the computers table and then the manufacturer. Click Next. And then it says, would you like a detail or summary query? The detail, you can see over in the preview pane, gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. It'll show every field of every record. I mean, that's obvious. It says it right there. And if you notice, we've got one record, AA, AA, and then from another table, another record. They're all unique records, 1, 2, 3, but if I go to summary, then what it wants to do is it says, okay, of the fields that contain numbers, if there's some commonality, I can go ahead and summarize that. So let's say from these departments, if these are computers that are assigned to each department in this table, I can go ahead and summarize 5 plus 7 equals 12. We'll learn about that in another training video, so to keep it simple, we'll go back to details. We'll show everything, okay? Click Next, and then it says, what title do you want for your query? Well, let's go ahead and delete the three-letter prefix because it's not a table, it's a query, so QRY is query about computers. Let me double click and select query. I don't need query computers query. So before I click finish, you can see you can open up the query to view the information in datasheet view, or you can go to the design view and modify it a bit more. Now remember, the only two objects of the four that we talked about, tables, queries, forms, and reports, only tables and queries have the datasheet view. So let's go ahead and just open this query up, click finish, and there we go. It just pulled in those fields that I wanted, the asset tag, date received, purchase price, and the manufacturer. Now let's see if this kept it together. I've got the manufacturer global, okay, and it's tied to the asset tag 2011. Let's open up the computers. Let's go down here, 2011, and it's got the manufacturer ID 1. So if I open up the manufacturers 1, it's global. So back to the query, it's global, it all ties it together. Neat. So I don't have to pull in the manufacturer's ID, I can just say, just give me the name from these two tables that related. These three fields from the computers, that one from the manufacturers. So you see how the query looks exactly the same, the datasheet view, as the datasheet view in the other tables. It's just that with a query, we can filter in what we want to see in more ways than one. Here's just a sample here, pulling in just the fields. If I want to go ahead and make any changes to my query, in other words, design it, well, let's see what the design view looks like. I can either come up here and, well, where's my design view? Well, I'm not on the Home tab. Click on that. There's the Design View button. You can click on that, or you can right-click on it and go down to Design View. You've got two sections here. Up at the top, you have a list of all the tables that contributed fields to this query. There they are. The computers table, manufacturers. Of course, if you can't see it, I don't want to scroll, so just hover over the border of the table until your pointer turns into arrows pointing in opposite directions, then just click and drag to stretch it open. Nice, okay. So you've got the computers table, and then we have the manufacturers. It lists all the fields, but in our query, it only pulled out the fields that we wanted to see through the query wizard. We said we just wanted to see the asset tag, date received, and purchase price. But nonetheless, in design view, you can later say, oh, wait a second, I want the manufacturer ID, or I want the warranty. And I'll show you how to design your query from scratch. But in any case, you can see that up at the top we got the tables. Down below in the grid, we have a list of all the fields from the different tables. You've got the asset tag, date received, purchase price, then it has the table it's being pulled from, then the manufacturers being pulled from the manufacturers table, and then of course our relationship. It shows you that little joint. It doesn't have the fancy one-to-many or many-to-one in here. In the query it just says, hey look, we're linked, and I'll cover this later on about that, what's called a join. It's joining these two tables. As long as you've got your tables related in the relationships window, again, database, tools to relationships, manufacturers to computers, let me close out. In the query, it'll show a little what's called a join. We'll cover this in a later training video, but to get back to my datasheet view, come up here, click on the datasheet view button, and there we go. Congratulations, we created our first simple query. As you recall in the previous training video, we learned how to create our first query by using the query wizard, where the wizard asked us a bunch of questions, we gave it the answers, and then boom, there was the query. Well, here I want to show you how you can create a query from scratch. To do that, come up here, click on the Create tab, go to the Queries group. Instead of wizard, we're going to be designing it from scratch. Click on it, and the very first question it wants to ask you is, what table do you want to base this query upon? What table of data? I'm going to go ahead and select Employees and click Add. You can also double click and you can see, whoops, I accidentally added. You can see the first copy of the original. That's why it's got the number 1. In any case, I'm going to close out. If you want to get rid of any additional tables there that you don't want your query to be based upon, in this case a duplicate, just go ahead and either right click on it, remove it, or select it and hit the delete key on the keyboard. It just deletes that copy from the query's design view here. It doesn't delete the table. In fact, if I go ahead and right click and remove that or delete it, again, the tables aren't deleted, just from the design view here. If I need to be able to pull that window back up again, instead of closing out and reopening the query to get that prompt, you can come up here to its related contextual tab. When we're in design view here, go to the query setup, click on show table, brings it up, or close out. You can also right click in a blank area up at the top and go to show table, and then go ahead and we'll double click on employees and close out. Now the query window here, the design view, is divided into two sections. You have the top section, the bottom section. The top one will show all the tables that we want to include in our query. We just have one here. Then the bottom section, the grid, is where we go ahead and we add the fields from the tables down below that we want to see in our query. I mean, we don't want to see all the fields from the employees table. If I did, I'd just open up the employees table, okay? Which, by the way, if you can't see all the fields here, you can scroll down, or you can hover over the bottom or the corner till your pointer turns into those arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then you can click and drag to stretch it out horizontally or down vertically. There we go. And by the way, if you don't have enough room up at the top or down below, you can hover over the split bar. You see how my pointer is turned into black arrows pointing up and down. Go ahead and click and drag that split bar up. Shortens the space up above, but we've got more viewing area down below for our grid. You can see the button. It's the exact same looking button as when we were playing with our tables and we went from the design view. In fact, let me click on the drop down arrow from the design view to the datasheet view, design data in any case. If I click on the view button now, I won't see anything because even though I have my table here, I haven't picked which fields that I want to be able to view in my datasheet view for my query. So to do that, I want to add the fields, like I said, from the table here down into my grid below. And there's quite a few ways you can go ahead and do that. One way is to double click on the field, adds it down below, gives us the name of the field that we added, also the table that it's coming from, in case if we have two or more tables, we can identify which table it's being pulled from. You can also click and drag the field and dump it to the field cell, or you can go ahead and click in the next available field, click on its drop down arrow. It'll also list the fields available from that table. Let's do weekly hours. I like double clicking. And then after you add them, if you need to remove them or rearrange them, to remove them or rearrange them, just go ahead and hover over. I don't know if you can see it, but that thin gray bar along the top here, if you hover over it, you see how my pointer turns into a black arrow pointing down? When you click on it, it selects that column. Once you have that column selected, you can either delete it or move it. To delete it, just go ahead and hit the delete key. It removes it from the grid below. Let me go ahead and double click and add it again. To move it, click on it to select it, and then go ahead and click on that thin gray bar again, and then go ahead and hold it down with your left mouse button, and you'll notice that little black line in between these two fields. If I move it over here in between those two, if I move it back and I let go, that's where it dumps the column that I have selected when I clicked and dragged it. You can click and drag it back, and then click off in a blank area here. And if I want to go ahead and see these fields and the data or the records of these fields, I can come up here to the results group, click on the view button, the datasheet view. You can also click on the run button. It does the same thing. Well, if you hover over it, it says that it performs the action specified in the query and will actually create some action queries. But for right now, either button will go ahead and dump us into the datasheet view. Click on it. That takes us to the datasheet view. Click design. We go back to design. Click on the fun run button. Takes us to the datasheet view as well. Now, I suppose before I get any further, I ought to save my query. The name of it's a generic name, query 1. So I can save it either in the datasheet view or design view. It doesn't matter. Just click on save. Add the 3-letter prefix query, so that way when I'm in design view in my forms and reports, I know that this is a query by the first 3 letters. And then go ahead and add my name, EE for employee pay, and then click OK. Updates it, and it also adds it over into the Access Object window, the navigation pane, that we can navigate around and see all our objects. If you can't see it here, the queries, just the tables, then you want to come up here, click on the drop down arrow, and make sure that all access objects is checked. Go ahead and click off of it. Remember that this query is based upon the employees table. When I'm in the datasheet view, any changes that I make in here will actually update the table as well, the records in the table, because this is just a straight link to that table. For example, we've got Max Klinger. He has a total of 38 hours. That's reflective of what's actually in the table. So if I double click, open up the employees table, there's Max Klinger, right? Now you can see why, when I start scrolling over, that it's great to have a query, because I don't need to view all these fields. I just need to get to and find the weekly hours for Max Klinger. And thank goodness he's record number 1. Otherwise, I'd have to, when I'm going over here, I'm like, okay, which line am I on? Well, I know it's coded. Every other line is white and the other's gray, but still. So it's Max Klinger. Let me go ahead and close out. So any changes that I make here, if I change his weekly hours in the query, and you're working now 40 hours a week, you'll notice that over here we've got the pencil. It's got the dot, 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 just like working in the datasheet view for the table there. I'm in edit mode. If I want to save it, click off in another record, or hold down the shift key and hit enter, and the pencil's gone. It accepted the data, then saved it, because if it didn't accept the data, then it wouldn't save it. The query is reflecting all the data in the table, so any changes I make in here should also update those changes in the table. Again, back to the employees, Max Klinger. Let's click and drag the scroll bar over. He went from 38 to 40. Great. Okay, then I go back to my design view, and then I can click on the view button or the run button. Again, takes me back to the Datasheet, go back to Design View, and then finally know that up on the Design tab, by default when we create a query in Design View, it's known as the Select Query. You can hover over it and get a little bit more description about it. As you recall, we learned how to filter out or in records in an earlier training video when we were working on our tables. You can also do the same steps in our queries, but the difference between the queries and the tables is that you can do so much more when it comes to filtering your records. In fact, let me go ahead and show you. Let me open up the inventory query here and quickly introduce you to what you're looking at. I've got my employees, the department that they're assigned to, the computers that have been assigned to them, the asset tag or barcode, the manufacturer of those computers, and I can click and drag and scroll over to the right. You can see all the other fields. Let me scroll back. How many records do I have here? Total of 24. So to go ahead and filter these records, I can come up here, and as you recall in the table training video, you can click on the filter button. I mean, you can do the simple filter options here, or the add criteria manually, which allows us more flexibility. We need to go to the design view here. And the two ways we can do that is by right-clicking on the tab, going to Design View, or coming up here, of course, Home tab to, there's the Design button, click on it. And as you recall, in the Design View, the query is split into two sections. We have the top one, all the tables that we added, and then down below, the fields from those tables that are viewable in the Datasheet view when we go back to our Datasheet view. I can't see my tables too well, they're cut off, so I'm going to go ahead and hover over that split bar that divides the top and bottom sections until my pointer turns into arrows pointing up and down. Click and drag that split bar down, opens up more of the top section. You can also hover over the bottom of any one of the tables and click and drag to stretch them open to see some of the fields, if not most of them or all of them. Now before we go ahead and we talk about the criteria field down below and start entering it in for, well, each one or two or more fields, well, first of all, you'll notice in this query that I have the relationship type. We didn't see that when we created our query by using the wizard. It only showed a link. It didn't show the one or the infinity symbol to show what type of relationship it was, in this case one-to-many. So in other words, if you want to see your relationship types in your queries, don't use the wizard because it'll never show it. Go ahead and create your query from scratch in the design view, okay? Okay, I've got 24 records. Of the 24 records, down below we've got our criteria row. And let's say that I only want to pull up those records or those employees who are in the human resource department. I can either come over here in the department name and type in human resource, or, well, I know the department code for the human resource department, it's 100. Go ahead and type it in and then hit the tab key. Anytime you type in criteria, don't click out of the cell, but always hit the tab key, because upon exit, when you hit the tab key, Access goes back in and looks in that field, that criteria cell, to make sure that what you entered in is acceptable, because if it isn't, it'll pull up a big window right here and say, I don't get what you're doing. Once we've done that, let's go ahead and take it for a test drive. Either click on the Fun Run button or click on the Datasheet View button. It brings up the datasheet here, and there we go. You can see we've got 3 records here, and 3's up above. The criteria, it only pulls up those records that have the department code 100, which has the department name Human Resource. Okay, let's go back to our design view. Now, like I said, you can have 2 or more criteria at the same time. So we've got 100. Let me go ahead and scroll over to the right and see if I can find one that I want to add. My second criteria, let's do purchase price. So I'm lining up in my criteria row to that purchase price field. So I click in that cell. And let's say that I want to find those employees, again, with the department code 100, so in the human resource department, that we've assigned a computer that we purchased for, let's say, $1,500 or less. So I'm going to go ahead and add the less than symbol, which is the shift comma key on the keyboard, and then type in 1500, and then again hit the tab key after you type in your criteria. So upon exit, go back and Access can check and verify that what you entered is acceptable. Let's go ahead and take it for a test run. Click on the Run button. There we go. 2 criteria. It has to belong to the department code 100, human resource. Scroll over. It also has to have the purchase price of less than $1,500. Maybe because all the computers that we purchased that was less than $1,500 are breaking down right now. I mean, cheap computers, right? So we better go ahead and replace this computer here. Let's go back to the design view. I'm going to go ahead and delete that criteria. Leave the other one alone, the 100 for human resource. And let's add one over here, criteria for the manufacturer. So they have to belong to the human resource, department code 100, and they also have to have a computer that was manufactured by, let's type in global. Go ahead and hit the tab key. Now you'll notice 2 things. First of all, that my letter G there isn't capitalized. That's okay because when it comes to criteria, it's not case sensitive. Also, it added quotes around it. Well, this is a text value field, so it'll always put quotes around text. Now, I forgot to add them, so metaphorically speaking, Access has a little butler. It'll go around and it'll add these things for you if you forget. Okay, let's go ahead and take this for a test run. Now again, it's got two criteria applied to it. The department code has to be 100 and the manufacturer has to be global. Great. Let's go back to the design view. Now that we know how to add our criteria, pretty simplistic, how about if I go ahead and go down into the OR row? Now, I refer to this OR row as the override because this cell, anything that you add in here, is not bound by the criteria. So right now, I only have one criteria. Remember, it's the 100 code. If I go ahead and type anything down in here, it's not going to be bound by the 100, so I could pull up anything additional that I pull down in here or that I enter down here in the OR row for manufacturer, like let's say, again, global. Hit the tab key, so I have the criteria 100. So I'll pull up all those records tied to the 100 code and pull up those records that were manufactured by global. Let's take it for a run and there we go. So it pulled up the department code 100 because that's the criteria. Then in the override row, it ignored the criteria and said, look, I'm looking for those computers that were manufactured by global. There's two of them. Well, coincidentally, you've got one 100 that was manufactured by global, so it pulled up the 100 here. And it did override the 100, technically speaking, because it's looking at the OR, the override field first, before the criteria. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to the design view. And we can go ahead and add on to this. In fact, if I click in here, hit the space bar, and type in OR, so now we've got an OR, so it overrides at global, but we can add another OR within that same cell. It can be global or SpyTech. Hit the tab key. Notice how it capitalizes the O and OR for me. Then because it's a text field, it also adds the quotes around SpyTech. So there's that little butler or Access cleaning up for me if I forget to add it. So now it's going to pull up all those records that are tied to the code 100 that are in the Human Resource Department and also that have the computers that were manufactured by global or SpyTech. Let me scroll back. Now we know that the department code is tied to the Human Resource Department. I can go ahead and uncheck to show that field. You can see the show row here. By default, all of the fields are showing. But if I uncheck that field, it doesn't prevent the criteria from working. It just says don't show it. And in this case, maybe I want to go ahead and have the criteria set up, but I don't want to see the code. I just want to see the department name. Then come up here, click on the Run button. So even though we don't have the department code field showing, it's still working. It's just hidden. So again, it pulled up all the computers that were manufactured by SpyTech and Global and that weren't in the Human Resource Department. They were in the IT cells, whatever. It ignores the criteria. So back to our design view. Let me go ahead and check that box. Let me go ahead and scroll down and let me delete that and scroll back. And then one final thing about the OR here is you can also do it in the criteria field. In that, instead of using the OR down below, you can go ahead and hit the spacebar, type in OR 200. So I want to be able to view the department codes 100 or 200, hit the tab key. There it went. It capitalized the O in OR. Take it for a test drive. There we go, 100 or 200. Go back to the design view here. Up until this point, we've only entered in criteria for either a number or a text data type field. What about a date data type field? First of all, let me go ahead and delete this. In fact, when it comes to deleting like a row here, and you've got a lot of criteria in there, instead of going into each cell, you can hover over, almost over the text, the criteria. Can you see my pointer turning into a black arrow pointing to the right? When you click on it, it selects the entire row. Then you can hit the delete key and it deletes all the contents within that row. Then I'm going to go ahead and scroll over to the right to find my date data type field, and there it is, date received. So let's say that I want to be able to find all those records that the computers we received came after January 1st of 2008. So anything after a date, you want to use the greater than symbol. Type it in and then type in the date, 1/1/2008. Hit the tab key so I can check my work. You'll notice it added pound symbols, which, whoops, I forgot to add those, but what's the point in remembering to add those if Access is going to add them for me? So anything that comes after January 1st of 08, let's see, either click on the datasheet view or the fun run button. I call it that because it's fun to run something. They both bring you up to the datasheet view. Click and drag and scroll over, and there it is. Do these two records come after January 1st of 08? They do. So the greater than symbol means anything after. Let's go back to our design view. And of course, if we flip that symbol to less than, shift, comma, those keys on the keyboard brings up the less than, and click on the run button, and then scroll over. There we go. All the records are before January 1st of '08. Let's go back to our design view. And how about if we want to find records in between two dates, like let's say June 1st of 2006, after that, but before January 1st of 2008. So to do that, let me go ahead and delete this. Now, if it's got to be after our first date, then we want to use the greater than symbol and then type in June 1st, 2006. And is an operator. In fact, let me get geeky with you. Access refers to the and even the or in the previous training video, and these symbols here, greater than, less than, and also equals, as operators. It's a way that we tell Access by using these operators what we want it to do. So we want to be able to find anything that comes after January 1st of '06, and it has to meet the second condition by using the operator and before January 1st, so we're going to use the less than symbol and type in 1/1/2008. Be sure to hit the tab key, adds the pound symbols around the dates there, and capitalize the A in and. It did it for me, so let's go ahead and click on the, we can click on the datasheet view button, that's fine. Scroll over to the right, let's see. Looking at the records and the dates received, do you find any that are not in between those two dates? In other words, it has to come after June 1st, 2006, and there's one. Even though it's close, it's still after June 1st of '06. And then all the other dates go right up to and just before January 1st of 2008. Okay, let's go back to our design view. Now, there's another way that you can write this without using the greater than or less than operators or symbols. And to do that, I need to make some changes here, but you notice how it's cut off? I can't see everything within that cell. Well, you can zoom in on that cell, in other words, open it up so you can see everything by right-clicking on it and zooming. There we go. Or the shortcut keys, let me click cancel, is Shift F2, and it brings up the same window. So that way you get a little bit more space before you have to scroll, if you have to type in that much. So we've got our criteria that has to be between these two dates, or older than that one, or after this date but before that one. Well, you can retype this by using another operator. It's called between, but to use the between, you have to get rid of the less than and greater than, and then type in between. So it's between this date and that date. And again, and means that it has to meet both conditions here. So click OK, hit the tab key, hit the run button, and it brings up the exact same records. So you can write it that way or use the greater than or less than symbols. In fact, let me go back to the design view. If you're going to write it this way, and let's say you don't want to find records in between those two dates, so it would be not between June 1st and January 1st of '08 there. So go ahead and type in not, space, hit the tab key. After it exit, it corrects it for me, capitalizes the N in not. So let's go ahead and take it for a run and scroll over. So now we're looking at records that aren't between those two dates. So it's either before June 1st of '06, which that one is, or after January 1st of 2008, which that one is. Okay, so it checks out. Let's go back to our design view, and let me go ahead and delete. In fact, let me go back and click on the run button. If you ever find that you have fields that are empty, for example, let's say you're taking orders and you had such a big rush you forgot to enter in some key information. Maybe you wrote it down, but you just had enough time to type in some of the data. For example, let's say we forgot to enter in Bob's first name. Let me click off so it saves it. So we've got one record that has an empty field. Well, if you want to be able to pull up those records that contain empty fields, so later on you can go ahead and fill them back in. We don't want to scroll through everything. We don't need to see everything, just those that are empty. Go back to the design view. It's really simple. Let me scroll over to the first name field and type in null. That means empty. Hit the tab key, Access checks it, and then says you're supposed to write in is null or is empty. So let's click on the run button. We only had one record that had one field that we entered the criteria in to check if it was empty. That was the first name, and it was, remember, Bob. Hold down the Shift key, hit Enter to save it. So when I go back to my design view and then I run it again, nothing should pull up because now everybody has a first name and there's no records that have an empty value in this field here. Let's go back to the design view. You can also do the not on this one. In other words, how about is not, space, hit the tab key. So now it finds all those records that are not empty, and then hit the run button. And all the records in the first name field have something in there, so they all pull 24. Back to the design view. So that way you can flip it if you're looking for those that aren't empty. Okay, let me go ahead and delete that. Let's advance further. I'm going to go to my department code. Remember, we have the codes 100, 200, 300. So let's say we wanted to find all the department codes that were greater than 200. We know the greater than symbol, but what about if we want to find all the department codes that were greater than or equal to 200? In other words, we don't want anything just beyond 200, but we also want to include or equal to 200. So how you write it is that we know the greater than, it's got to be greater than, but also we type in equals and then 200. So greater than or equal to, hit the run button, there we go. It includes the 200 because it's equal to, and then anything greater than. Back to our design view, and then of course flip that to the less than, so anything less than or equal to 200. Now, you don't want to put the equal sign on the left side, it's always got to be on the right, because if you put it on the left side of the greater than or less than operator or symbol, and then you hit the tab key, it says, what are you doing? Click OK, and then be sure to change that around. So it's going to be greater than or equal to. Let me go ahead and delete that. You can also use the greater than or less than symbols for text data type fields, like how about last name? What would you say if I typed in greater than K and hit the tab key? What does that mean? Well, that last name that begins with the letter K comes after K, because remember, greater than is after. So if you click on the Fun Run button, well, it includes the K's, but then anything after that. So it continues down the alphabet, O, R, S, down to W. Click the Design View button. Then, of course, you can flip that to anything before K, which is less than, and then hit the Run button. Doesn't include the K, just before that K. Go back to our Design View. Let me go ahead and delete that. And then the last operator I want to show you is the not equal to. So for example, if I want to be able to pull up all the departments except the IT department, let me go back and click on the Run button. Okay, the IT department is 400. I can use the code or the name. Let's use the name. Go back to the Design View. What you'd want to type in is the less than and greater than symbol back to back. That's the not equal to operator when you combine those together. Then hit the spacebar and type in IT, hit the tab key. It's not case sensitive. Go ahead and click on the Run button, and it pulls up no IT 400 department codes here. Now if you have a query where you have two or more number formatted fields you want to calculate, for example, I've got my pay rates query. Let me double click and open it up. I've got my employees, their weekly hour and hourly rate, and I want to be able to calculate their weekly pay by multiplying their weekly hours by their hourly rate. So to do that, to calculate, let's go to the Design View of the query, find the first blank field over to the right here, and I can create it one of a couple of ways. I can either right-click on it and build it. When I build it, it opens up a window and it gives us the sample fields and the operators that we can use to multiply the two fields. I mean, for me, I can type it in a lot faster than doing it this way, but I'll show you both. So for example, we've got over in the left field the expression elements from our query, so we want to make sure that we select the pay rates query because that's what we're in. So we can see the fields that are available, and it's the weekly hours and hourly rate that I want to multiply. So I double click to add the weekly hours, K. Then I go to the operators because there I find my asterisks. I can double click to add it. Now you can type it in. You don't have to come down here and select the expression value and double click to add it. You know, I can backspace and then type it in. Fine. Hit the space bar. Then come back to my pay rates query and then double click hourly rate. And then when I'm finished, that's it. Multiply those two fields, click OK, hit the tab key, I'm done. But after I do that, you notice that Access came in and updated it. Let me go ahead and right click to zoom in. So it's multiplying these two fields together, but it added a colon, and to the left of the colon, expression 1, which is the name of that field. It's going to be the column label, which I don't like and we'll change in just a minute. So that's one way. Let me click cancel. Another way to enter it in is just to simply type it. To me it's a lot faster in that. Let me go ahead and hover over the top gray bar there till my pointer turns into a black arrow. So when I click on it, it selects the column, so when I delete it, it deletes all the contents of that column. Like I said, you can just simply type it in. So when I type in, I'm just going to type in the name of these fields, of course with the asterisks in between, so I'll go weekly hours. Now notice how I typed it just like I saw it over here, no spaces. Well, I didn't type it exactly because I have a lowercase w as opposed to an uppercase. When it comes to calculations, it's not case sensitive, but just make sure that we don't add any spaces. I find that some of my students have problems with that. They go, oh, weekly hours, let me go ahead and add a space. It's like, no, just type it like you see it over here. If it has no space, don't add it. Hit the space bar, asterisk the operator that multiplies the next field, hourly rate. Hit the tab key and wow, look what happened. It added the square brackets and also the expression 1. Let me right click and zoom in. So it's just like going to that build window but for me it's so much easier to and so much quicker to type it in, especially if it's going to add everything for me, the brackets around it, the asterisks. Now it only does this in the query, but if you go to other areas of Access and you try to do some calculations and you don't add the square brackets, Access is going to have a fit. So at least for the query here, I'm fine. Let me go ahead and click OK, and then go ahead and click on the Run button and see what it looks like. All right. We've got the expression 1, again, the column label, which I don't like. We'll change in just a second. And then it's got the numbers. It's supposed to be multiplying these two fields. I don't know about you, but 40 times 75, find something a little bit easier to calculate in my head. Ooh, there we go. 40 times 1 equals 40. Great, it works. Now I want to go back and change the format to currencies, so you have the $sign there, and then of course the column label. So back to Design View. Let's go ahead and right-click and zoom in. And then anything that falls to the left of that colon, make sure you don't delete the colon, because that separates the name of the column from the actual calculation. So if I delete that, then I go ahead and type in weekly gross. So to the left of it, that's the name of the column. To the right of the colon is going to be the calculation is going to be performed. Click OK. Now also we want the results of this to be in currency. So we'll right-click on that field and go down and bring up its properties, the property sheet. So for that field, we want to change the format from general to something, well, currency. Okay. Close out. Be sure to save your work. Go ahead and click on the View button, and there we go. We've got weekly gross. Well, if you can't see it, hover over to the right-hand side till you see your black arrows pointing in opposite directions. Double-click really fast, and it does a best fit. So we can see weekly gross, the column label, and then also it's got the format currency. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.